At 6:17 a.m., the world changes without announcing itself. There is no blast, no flash, no sound that tells people to look up. The shift arrives quietly, through screens lighting up in bedrooms and kitchens, through radios interrupting weather reports, through a sudden stillness that settles over cities already awake. Something has happened far away, and yet it is immediately everywhere. Traffic lights continue their cycles. Trains still arrive on time. Coffee pours into mugs with the same morning ritual. But the air feels altered, as if pressure has dropped by a degree too small to measure. Phones vibrate once, then again. Emergency alerts appear with language that is careful and incomplete. Authorities confirm an event. They do not explain its shape. They ask for calm, and the request lands heavier than reassurance. By 6:45 a.m., newsrooms become the first living organism to react. Producers stop debating headlines and start counting minutes. Maps fill with shaded regions that do not yet mean anything to the public. Scientists are invited on air and choose their words with surgical restraint. They speak of atmospheric disruption, of particulate density, of sunlight behaving differently. They do not say winter. Not yet. The sun rises anyway, but its light looks diluted, filtered through something unseen. Cameras adjust automatically. Human eyes do not. Commuters notice the sky feels farther away. A few people stop walking mid-step, scanning the horizon for smoke that never appears. Others keep moving, because stopping would mean admitting uncertainty, and uncertainty is expensive this early in the day. At 7:30 a.m., airports pause without drama. Flights are delayed, then held. Runways sit open and unused, long gray strips beneath a paling sky. Inside terminals, departure boards blink, refresh, and repeat the same word. Delayed. No one shouts. Travelers cluster near windows, watching for motion that does not come. The absence of explanation begins to feel intentional. Power grid operators notice anomalies first. Solar input drops by fractions that should not exist on a clear morning. Wind forecasts misalign with reality. Control rooms compensate silently, rerouting energy, smoothing the curves, buying time. Lights stay on. Elevators move. The system holds, but only by thinning its margins. Redundancy quietly disappears. By mid-morning, the supply chain becomes a character in the story. Trucks leave distribution centers later than scheduled. Some turn back. Others wait for approvals that do not arrive. Ports slow their unloading without announcing closures. The movement of goods, usually invisible, suddenly feels hesitant, as if the roads themselves are listening. In supermarkets, shelves are still mostly full. People shop differently, though they do not yet admit it. Hands reach past fresh food and linger on cans, on grains, on anything that lasts. Managers receive private instructions and lock storage doors without explanation. The sound of metal clicking shut echoes longer than it should. Governments speak at 9:58 a.m. The timing feels deliberate. Statements are calm, precise, and notably short. They acknowledge a global atmospheric event following multiple detonations far from population centers. They emphasize monitoring, cooperation, stability. They avoid duration. They avoid consequence. The gaps between sentences do more work than the words themselves. Schools begin early dismissals under neutral language. Parents arrive confused, scanning faces for cues. Children sense the tension anyway. Classrooms empty into parking lots under a sun that no longer warms the asphalt as expected. No one uses the word nuclear, but everyone feels its outline. By late morning, radios become unreliable narrators. Broadcasts crackle with static, then return, then fail again. Online feeds refresh slowly. Messages arrive out of order. The flow of information loses its rhythm, and with it, the illusion of control. People stop scrolling and start listening to the space between updates. The central conflict forms here, not in the sky, but on the ground. Communities were warned that if the unthinkable ever arrived, survival would depend on local preparation, shared heat, stored food, trusted information networks. Plans practiced before they were needed. Most places postponed these measures. Budgets were tight. Threats felt abstract. The sky had been blue. At 11:42 a.m., meteorological models update again. Sunlight projections dip further. Agricultural agencies quietly revise crop forecasts downward. The consequences will not be immediate. That is what makes them dangerous. Delay becomes the enemy, and time becomes something that can be wasted. By noon, the day feels older than it should. Offices release employees early. Streets thin out. Doors close with more intention. Neighborhoods grow quiet before they usually do. The national heartbeat slows, audible only in its absence. Everyone is waiting for clarity, for confirmation, for someone to say how bad this will be. None of that arrives. Instead, the light continues to fade by imperceptible degrees. The cold hints at itself, not yet present but promised. And somewhere between one update and the next, it becomes clear that the first mistake has already been made. The moment for preparation has passed, and the moment for reckoning has begun. At 12:18 p.m., community leaders hold conference calls that feel ceremonial. Voices overlap, then fall into careful order. Questions circle reserves, authority, responsibility. Plans exist in documents, not in muscle memory. Coordination hesitates, and hesitation spreads. Public spaces empty without instruction. Libraries close. Recreation centers lock their doors. Shared spaces now signal dependence on systems that may not last. Outside, the sky continues its slow withdrawal. Shadows sharpen. Daylight flattens into something metallic. Rumors begin traveling faster than facts, filling the silence left by restraint. By early afternoon, understanding settles in. This is not a crisis measured in hours. Whatever has begun is patient, and patience favors preparation. As the day leans forward, a quiet truth takes shape. The world did not end this morning, but has entered a season no one rehearsed for, and it is still moving. The consequences are not loud yet. They are arranging themselves carefully, waiting for nightfall to prove how much was ignored when the light was still available and how little time remains to change course now. The afternoon arrives without ceremony, slipping into the day like a colder breath. By 12:40 p.m., the first true shortages appear, not announced by alarms but by absence. Shelves that were full an hour earlier now hold gaps shaped like decisions. People notice their hands hesitating, calculating weight, calories, longevity. No one speaks about hoarding. They simply shop as if tomorrow has become uncertain currency. Outside, traffic thins further. Highways stretch empty beneath a sky that no longer reflects the season. The light has turned dull, a muted silver that flattens color and depth. Billboards glow too brightly against it, drawing the eye in ways that feel unnatural. Drivers turn off radios because the static has begun to feel accusatory, as if the noise itself is watching. By early afternoon, power grids begin shedding comfort to preserve function. Office buildings dim their lighting. Elevators slow. Climate control systems cycle less frequently, allowing the cold to announce itself in drafts and quiet shivers. These changes are framed as temporary optimizations. The body recognizes them as warnings. At 1:55 p.m., local news stations shift tone. Anchors sit straighter, their voices lower. They stop filling space with speculation and begin repeating verified fragments over and over until repetition becomes a message. Scientists now say the word winter carefully, paired with qualifiers that do not soften its weight. Nuclear is still implied, never centered, like a shadow everyone refuses to face directly. Communities begin to fracture along invisible lines. Some neighborhoods organize instinctively, checking on shared buildings, testing generators, counting hands willing to help. Others retreat inward, doors closing, lights dimming behind curtains drawn too early. The difference is not ideology. It is memory. Places that rehearse cooperation move with less noise. By 3 p.m., fuel becomes a whisper concern. Stations remain open, but deliveries are delayed. Prices freeze instead of rising, a sign of intervention that feels fragile. Drivers top off tanks without meeting each other's eyes. The smell of gasoline lingers longer than usual, sharp and grounding, a reminder of mobility that may not last. Phones grow quiet in a new way. Notifications slow. Messages arrive late, then not at all. It is not a blackout. It is congestion. the digital equivalent of a crowd holding its breath. Social feeds filled with screenshots of official statements, circled phrases, underlined omissions. Rumors spread through private channels, faster than corrections can follow. At 4:20 p.m., the temperature drops again, defying forecasts issued that morning. Heating systems engage across entire regions, pulling hard on grids already compensating for reduced input. Control rooms adjust thresholds and hope the math holds. Somewhere, a margin disappears entirely, though no one can yet point to where. Public spaces lose their neutrality. Malls close early. Transit hubs echo with footsteps that seem too loud. Security presence increases without explanation, not confront but to observe. People move faster, shoulders angled forward, as if walking against a wind that is not there. As evening approaches, food distribution centers receive revised instructions. Priority lists shorten. Routes consolidate. Efficiency replaces redundancy. What cannot be moved today is postponed indefinitely. The delay feels administrative, but its weight presses into kitchens and pantries already being reassessed. At 6:10 p.m., the sun sets nearly half an hour earlier than expected. Streetlights flicker on unevenly, some failing to ignite at all. Darkness pools between blocks, thick and unfamiliar. The first rolling outages arrive without warning, brief but instructive. When power returns, it does not bring relief, only confirmation. Inside homes, people layer clothing instead of adjusting thermostats. Meals shrink without discussion. Conversations turn practical, stripped of ornament. Children ask fewer questions than expected, sensing that answers are rationed now. Radios hum softly in corners, static threading through official comm. By nightfall, cities appear hollowed out. Windows go dark floor by floor. The glow that once defined skylines collapses inward, block by block. Rural areas vanish entirely, swallowed by a darkness so complete it feels deliberate. Above it all, the sky reflects nothing back. Emergency meetings multiply, but coordination lags. Plans exist, but they rely on systems that assumed abundance. Community stockpiles are discovered incomplete, undocumented, or locked behind authorities who cannot be reached. The strategy that once promised resilience now reads like a warning label ignored. At 9:30 p.m., ash finally appears in reports from distant regions, light enough to be mistaken for dust. Satellite images confirm what eyes cannot yet see. The atmosphere is thickening. Sunlight will weaken further. This is not a moment. It is a trajectory. People go to sleep earlier, not from peace, but from conservation. Buildings settle into the cold with unfamiliar sounds. Pipes click with contracts. The world seems to be learning a new posture. As midnight passes, one realization settles across the quiet like frost. This phase was meant for preparation, for coordination, for choosing to face the cold together. Instead, it has become an inventory of what was postponed. The night holds its breath, and somewhere beyond the darkened streets, the longer winter continues moving closer, patient and unconcerned with regret. Near the edges of the cities, where infrastructure thins, the consequences sharpen first. Water pressure falters, then stabilizes at lower levels. Waste collection pauses without notice. Small failures stack quietly, each one survivable, together becoming something else. Community leaders exchange messages that arrive late and incomplete, realizing coordination now depends on neighbors, not networks. The conflict clarifies in these margins. Survival is no longer abstract or national. It is local, improvised, and unequal. Some places still have light, warmth, and shared plans. Others already ration silence and darkness. The difference is not chance. It is a residue of choices made when preparation felt optional. As the cold deepens and the sky continues its withdrawal, the day closes on a truth too heavy to speak aloud. The window to act together is narrowing, and whatever comes next will measure who learned that lesson in time and who did not. Morning will test that divide with unforgiving clarity and consequences. Dawn returns reluctantly, filtered through a sky that no longer remembers how to be blue. At 6:04 a.m., the light is thin and metallic, spreading without warmth across streets emptied of routine. Windows glow briefly as people wake, not to alarms, but a cold. Breath fogs kitchens. Floors bite bare feet. The night has taken something with it and not given it back. By morning, the language has changed. Officials no longer describe possibilities. They describe conditions. Nuclear winter is spoken aloud now, without apology, stripped of metaphor. The words travel through radios that crackle and stall, through bulletins pinned to community boards, through whispers traded at doorways. The sound of it lands heavily, like a verdict read slowly. Food becomes the first undeniable truth. Deliveries do not resume. Warehouses sit sealed, their contents unreachable without fuel, authority, or coordination. Refrigerated goods spoil quietly behind locked doors. In homes, cupboards are open and closed again, counts taken, meals recalculated. The future contracts to days. No one says this out loud, but everyone understands it the same way. By mid-morning, movement resumes, cautious and purposeful. People leave houses carrying lists, containers, expectations that will not be met. Streets fill with a new kind of traffic, slower and quieter, eyes scanning for signs of order. Community centers open where they can. Churches unlock doors. Schools repurpose hallways. Heat becomes a shared resource, negotiated in glances and gestures. The cold deepens by degrees that feel personal. It presses through walls, settles into joints, slows hands. Power holds in some districts and fails in others, not as an emergency, but as a pattern. Rolling outages become fixed absences. Generators hum in isolated pockets, their sound carrying farther than it should, marking places of temporary privilege. Information fractures further. National broadcasts fade into repetition, then silence. What remains is local, uneven, human. Notices are handwritten. Instructions contradict each other. Authority shifts subtly from institutions to whoever can keep the lights on or the doors open. Leadership is no longer declared. It is observed. By noon, ash finally arrives. Not the dramatic fall imagined in old footage, but a fine, persistent dust that settles on coats and windowsills. It dulls color, softens edges, confirms what the sky has been suggesting for days. People brush it away instinctively, then stop, realizing futility. This is not debris. It is atmosphere. Agriculture agencies release their final projections and then go quiet. Growing seasons are suspended indefinitely. Fields wait under a dim sun that no longer feeds them. This loss is not immediate, but it is absolute. The ground will not give what it cannot take. The future of food becomes a calculation without optimistic margins. Communities that practice begin to look different. Shared kitchens organize efficiently. Rotations form. Fuel is pooled. Heat is centralized. Children are kept together, not for schooling, but for warmth. In these places, fear is present but contained, shaped into routine. Elsewhere, isolation accelerates collapse. Doors stay shut. Resources are guarded. Nights stretch longer. By afternoon, the emotional shift becomes visible. Panic does not arrive. Acceptance does. People move with deliberation, conserving motion, conserving words. Arguments feel wasteful. Silence becomes currency. The national heartbeat slows again, audible now in a rhythm of shared breaths in crowded rooms. As daylight fades early, the consequences of delays stand fully exposed. Emergency plans are activated too late to prevent scarcity, only to manage its distribution. Mistakes made weeks and years ago surface without disguise. Funding deferred, drills canceled, warnings archived. The cost of normalcy is tallied in degrees of cold and ounces of food. At 6:48 p.m., darkness locks into place. City lights fail in broad sections, not flickering this time, but gone. The stars appear sharper through a thin atmosphere, indifferent and distant. Fires burn in controlled spaces, their glow reflecting off faces drawn close together. Smoke hangs low, blending with ash, blurring the boundary between inside and out. Night brings sound back to the world. Coughs echo, with cracks in the cold. Generators sputter and fall silent. Somewhere, a radio finds a signal long enough to confirm what everyone already knows. This condition will persist. Days will shorten. Temperatures will drop Further, relief will not arrive from elsewhere. In the quiet hours, the central truth settles fully. The disaster was never only the detonations that darkened the sky. It was the assumption that survival could be outsourced, that preparation was optional, that community could be improvised under pressure. Nuclear winter exposes that lie with methodical patience. Near midnight, meetings form around flickering lanterns. Plans are redrawn smaller, tighter, more honest. Some communities choose to merge, to share risk and resources. Others fracture along old lines, unwilling or unable to trust. The divergence feels final. Paths separate not by ideology, but by readiness to endure together. In the margins of these decisions, memory becomes a resource as vital as fuel. Older practices resurface, remembered by a few and adopted by necessity. Food is stretched through methods once dismissed as obsolete. Spaces are reorganized for bodies rather than comfort. Stories of earlier hardships circulate, not as inspiration, but as instruction. The act of remembering becomes a quiet form of resistance against the cold. Each shared technique, each lesson recovered, slows the unraveling by inches. It is not enough to reverse what has begun, but it buys time, and time is now the only currency that still holds universal value. Even this, however, depends on trust, which remains scarce and uneven. As the first full day under a dimmed sun ends, the world feels older, narrower, and strangely quiet. The season ahead has no calendar, only consequences. Those who prepared are no longer waiting. Those who did not are no longer choosing. And as the cold deepens and the sky continues to withhold its light, one unresolved question lingers in the darkened air. When the next test arrives, will the remaining communities close their doors, or finally open them to each other before the winter decide for them? Morning arrives without brightness, a pale suggestion of light, seeping through clouds that refuse definition. At 6:11 a.m., the cold feels settled, no longer a visitor but a resident with keys. Streets hold their breath. Doors open carefully. The world wakes into a narrower version of itself, measured by heat, by proximity, by what can be shared without breaking. The language of the day is practical. People speak in counts and turns and limits. How long the fire will last. How many bodies the room can hold. Which hours the generator may breathe. Names matter less than functions now. Yet familiarity grows in small exchanges, a nod, a past cup, the quiet acceptance of another presence. By mid-morning, movement organizes around centers of warmth. Community buildings glow faintly, islands against a gray tide. The air inside is dense with breath and patience. Rules appear without being written. Keep the door closed. Feed the youngest first. Rotate the watch. Conflict simmers but remains contained, tempered by the shared understanding that chaos would cost more than compromise. Outside, those without access drift along sidewalks dusted with ash, faces wrapped, eyes scanning for signs. The city feels rearranged, streets leading not to commerce but to shelter. Windows are opaque with condensation. The soundscape is stripped to essentials. Footsteps, coughing, the soft thud of being set aside. At 10:30 a.m., a broadcast breaks through the static long enough to offer direction, not rescue. The message urges consolidation, local authority, mutual aid. It acknowledges scarcity without apology. The voice is steady, human, unadorned. When the signal fades, the silence feels less empty for having heard it. Food distribution begins in earnest where planning existed. Portions are small and equal. Records are kept by hand. Waste is watched with sharp eyes. The act of eating becomes ceremonial, a reminder of continuity rather than comfort. Elsewhere, doors remain closed and meals are private calculations, guarded and shrinking. The central conflict sharpens as paths diverge. Some communities choose openness, trading certainty for resilience. Others harden, protecting what remains with distance and suspicion. Neither choice feels clean. Both carry consequences that will surface slowly, like frost spreading across glass. By afternoon, the cold asserts authority. Pipes freeze in older buildings. Water is carried in containers, counted carefully. The effort of survival becomes visible in posture and pace. People move less. Words are rationed. Yet moments of unexpected care appear. A blanket offered, a place made closer to the fire. Leadership emerges quietly, not from titles, but from steadiness. Those who remember procedures, who listen before speaking, who absorb fear without amplifying it. Their presence reshapes rooms, slows pulses, keeps attention on what can be done now rather than what has been lost. As daylight fades early again, the sky presses lower. Ash thickens, muting sound and color. Fires are fed sparingly. Generators rest between uses. Night planning replaces night waiting. Maps are sketched, routes agreed upon, contingencies whispered. Trust is extended in increments, tested and reinforced. Yet tension builds at the edges. A nearby district reports theft. Another goes dark entirely. Stories travel faster than facts, carried by messengers and memory. Each tale adds weight to decisions already made, challenging the balance between mercy and survival. After dark, a small convoy arrives from the outskirts. People carrying what they can no longer use alone. Their faces show relief and shame in equal measure. The welcome they receive is cautious but real. Supplies are pooled. Space is made. The room warms perceptibly, not just from bodies, but from purpose. Late into the night, a realization settles among those still awake. This phase will not end quickly. The winter ahead is not a single trial, but a sequence of tests, each asking the same question in different forms. Will you share, or will you shrink? Sleep comes unevenly, broken by shifts and checks, and the constant awareness of cold pressing at walls. Dreams are practical, focused on tasks unfinished. When eyes open again, it is not to hope for rescue, but to continue. Near dawn, a runner brings news from a connected settlement. They have chosen differently. Their doors are closed. Their resources guarded. Communication has ceased. The distance between communities has become more than physical. The message lands quietly, but its impact is profound. The choice is no longer theoretical. Paths are separating, and the space between them is filling with consequence. By mid-morning again, routines settle further, shaping days into survivable patterns. Tools are inventoried, skills exchanged, tasks rotated to prevent exhaustion from becoming injury. The rhythm steadies nerves. Children learn the boundaries of warmth and shadow, adapting faster than expected. Elders recount methods once used when power was unreliable and neighbors indispensable. Their voices carry authority earned by memory, and listening becomes another form of fuel. Even disagreements are moderated by the shared awareness that division would cost lives measured not in numbers, but in names. Outside, the cold persists relentless and impartial, but inside these spaces, intention holds. Each small success strengthens resolve, yet beneath it all runs an undercurrent of urgency. The ash continues to fall. The light continues to thin. And beyond the edges of cooperation, the closed districts grow quieter, their choices echoing as warnings. The day advances with careful steps, and every hour without collapse feels earned, fragile, and temporary, reminding all who remain awake that the balance they maintain is not guaranteed by circumstance, but by continued willingness to stand together, again and again, until the season breaks or the world reshapes itself beyond recognition. For everyone, the fifth morning arrives without ceremony, a thin gray light pressing against windows like a question that refuses an answer. At 6:09 a.m., breath hangs visibly in shared rooms, and the cold has learned the contours of every wall. The world feels reduced to essentials now: warmth, food, trust, time. Everything else has fallen away. Movement begins quietly. People rise in sequence to conserve heat, bodies replacing one another near the fire. The routine has become muscle memory. No one speaks about how quickly it formed or what that implies. Adaptation is not celebrated. It is simply necessary. Outside, ash coats the ground in a fine, persistent layer, softening footsteps and swallowing sound. The sky holds its dimness, a ceiling that never lifts. Those tasked with checking perimeters move with caution, scanning for motion, for signs of approach, for anything that suggests change. Change is no longer assumed to be good. By mid-morning, the inventory is taken again. Numbers are written, erased, rewritten smaller. Supplies still exist, but the margin for error has vanished. Every decision now carries weight that can be felt physically, a tightening the chest, A pause before agreement. Scarcity has sharpened attention. The central conflict returns in quieter form. Cooperation sustains a group, but it also exposes it. Every shared resource is a potential vulnerability. Every open door is a question mark. The balance between inclusion and protection grows thinner each day. At 10:47 a.m., a messenger arrives on the northern route, breathless, eyes wide with information. Another settlement has fractured overnight. Disagreement over food distribution turned into separation, then silence. The story is delivered without embellishment, but its effect ripples through the room. Fracture is contagious. The response is measured. No panic. No debate. Plans are adjusted. Watches extended. Signals agreed upon. Preparedness deepens not from fear, but from recognition. This is how collapse travels, not in waves, but in whispers. Food is served at noon, smaller than yesterday. No one comments. Gratitude is expressed through stillness, through bowls scraped clean. Children eat first, then elders, then those who will work the night shift. Order remains intact, though it requires effort now. By afternoon, exhaustion becomes the enemy. Muscles ache. Concentration slips. Tasks take longer. Leadership rotates deliberately to prevent failure from wearing a familiar face. Rest is scheduled, enforced, respected. Survival has learned to value sustainability over heroics. The sky darkens early again. Fires are fed sparingly. Shadows stretch across walls marked with charcoal tallies, counting days without sunlight strong enough to matter. Time is tracked not by clocks, but by need. As evening settles, a difficult decision surfaces. A nearby group has requested entry. They arrive at the edge of light, carrying little. Their resources spent, their options narrowed. The room grows quiet as eyes move from face to face. This is the test the winter keeps presenting. Discussion is brief, honest, heavy. Supplies will stretch thinner. Space will grow tighter. Trust will be asked for again. The alternative is known. Doors closed elsewhere have not preserved safety. They have only delayed reckoning. The door opens. The group is admitted. Blankets are shared. A place is made. The room feels smaller, warmer, louder with breath. Relief flickers across faces, quickly replaced by responsibility. Compassion is not an ending. It is a commitment. Night deepens. Outside, the cold remains absolute, unconcerned with human decisions. Inside, the air holds tension and purpose in equal measure. Conversations soften. Sleep comes in fragments. The generator rests. Near midnight, a radio crackles unexpectedly to life. A weak signal pushes through static long enough to carry a message. Not help, not rescue. Confirmation. The atmospheric models have stabilized into certainty. The winter will persist longer than initial estimates. Months, not weeks. The voice does not tremble. It simply states what is. Silence follows. It is heavier than before, weighted with duration. People absorb the information without outward reaction. The horizon of survival stretches, demanding recalculation of everything already rationed. In the quiet hours, something shifts. The idea of waiting fades. There will be no return to what was. The goal adjusts from endurance to transformation. Skills must deepen. Networks must expand. Isolation is no longer an option masquerading as safety. Before dawn, plans are redrawn again, this time outward-facing. Routes between cooperating settlements are mapped. Signals standardized. Resources accounted for collectively, not locally. The winter has forced a choice, and the choice has been made. As the first hint of morning presses against the ash-thickened sky, people gather near the fire, faces lit unevenly, eyes reflecting fatigue and resolve. The world beyond remains hostile, dim, uncertain. But within this circle, a fragile structure is formed, built not from abundance, but from agreement. The season ahead will test it relentlessly. Hunger will return. Cold will deepen. Trust will strain. Yet the lesson has finally landed, undeniable and irreversible. Survival belongs not to those who close themselves off first, but to those who learned, even late, to stay open longest. And as the light fails once more to arrive on time, the question that remains is no longer whether the winter will end, but whether this hard-earned unity will last long enough to see whatever comes after it.